Good. Yes, so I'm Anna Galla. I'm a researcher at Graz University of Technology. And the work I'm going to present, I did together with Silke Biermann and Leonid Borowski at École Polytechnique in Paris. And I'm going to present you a dynamical mean field theory-based approach to compute the electronic structure of rare earth semiconductors. So a short outline of my talk. I will start by introducing my target materials, which are the rare earth mononitrides and rare earth fluorosulfides. Then I will present you my methodology, which is a combination of dynamical mean field theory and a semi-local exchange correlation potential in DFT. And I will also show you the method we developed to compute the screen-Coulomb interaction from first principles. Yeah. And finally, I will come to the results for my target materials, and I will show you electronic spectral function and the optical response of my target materials. And there will also be some comparison to experiment. Yeah, so to start with, my target materials are rare earth semiconductors, actually two classes of rare earth semiconductors. The first class are these rare earth mononitrides, LNN, where LN stands for a rare earth element. They have this simple cubic rock-side structure, which you can see here on this slide. And they are ferromagnetic semiconductors, which means they have a ferromagnetic ground state. That's why they are interesting as prospective spintronics materials. However, above a certain temperature, around 70 Kelvin, they are all paramagnetic. And these materials, they are challenging to treat in experiment and in theory. In experiment, it's mainly because of defects like oxygen impurities or nitrogen vacancies. So the nitrogen vacancies, they introduce in-gap levels in the materials, which are difficult to distinguish from localized F bands in the experiments. And in theory, it's mainly the strong electronic correlation effects in the rare earth 4F shell, which require methods beyond density functional theory. And here in the bottom, you can see measured a recent study of the optical conductivity in neodymium nitride and gadolinium nitride. So this is my first class of target materials. And the second one are the rare earth fluorosulfides. And they are interesting as pigment materials because they show nice colors. So here in the bottom right corner, you can see the measured diffuse reflectance of the various compounds, especially samarium fluorosulfide, which shows this nice yellow color, while cerium fluorosulfide has this brilliant red color. Yeah, and I should also mention that on this slide, you can see the crystal structure of these rare earth fluorosulfides, which is a layered tetragonal crystal structure. And my goal was to compute the electronic structure of these materials from first principles, which is quite challenging. So actually, in these materials, you have two challenges. The first one is related to the strong electronic correlation effects in the rare earth 4F shell. So what you have in the figure on this slide here is the density of states of neodymium nitride as you would obtain from a straightforward density functional theory calculation in the local density approximation. So the sharp peak at the Fermi energy here represents the neodymium 4F states, which is of course not correct because we know these materials, they are not metals, they are semiconductors. And the reason why DFT fails to correctly describe the neodymium 4F states are the strong correlation effects in the 4F shell. But we all know that we can cure this issue by using dynamical mean field theory. However, there is a second challenge in these materials, which is related to the underestimation of band gaps in DFT. So here this would be the semiconducting band gap between the nitrogen 2p states in blue and the neodymium 5d states in green. So in standard DFT, this band gap is underestimated. Then the best thing to do would be to do a GW calculation, or more simple, we can use a semi-local exchange correlation potential in DFT. And that is actually what I did. So what I used is this Tran-Blaha modified Becke-Johnson potential, MBJ, as it is implemented in the Wien2K program package. Yeah, and here on this slide, you have a short overview of this computational approach, which we developed to address the electronic structure of these rare earth semiconductors. So it's called MBJ at DFT plus DMFT. It's essentially a DFT plus DMFT approach where I use the MBJ potential in DFT. So what I do first, that's what you can see on the left, is a charge self-consistent DFT plus DMFT computation. And here I use the LDA in DFT with the Wien2K program. And for the Wannier projection and the DMFT cycle, I use the TRIX and the TRIX DFT tools programs. And also important to mention, in order to solve the DMFT impurity problem, I use a Hubbard-1 approximation, Hubbard-1 solver. And then once this charge self-consistent computation is converged, I once run a DFT cycle with this MBJ potential. And then on top, I do another DMFT cycle on top of this MBJ corrected Kohn-Sham bands. So I use this MBJ potential only perturbatively. And this is kind of justified first simply from a practical reason, because it's known that this potential gives better band gaps when it's used perturbatively and not self-consistently. And second, it's also justified from a theoretical perspective, because this MBJ potential is a potential and it is not derived from a total energy function. Yes, so this is this computational approach. And I also wanted to briefly show you how we computed the screened Coulomb interaction from first principles. So for that, for these materials, we developed a constrained DFT, CDFT plus Hubbard-1 approach. It's essentially CDFT approach where we treat the rare earth 4F states in Hubbard-1. So here in the first line, you have the Hamiltonian of the DMFT impurity problem in Hubbard-1, which consists of the one electron part and the Hubbard interaction. And the single electron levels, they consist of the chemical potential plus the Kohn-Sham Hamiltonian projected onto the 4F shell minus a double counting correction V. And in this CDFT plus Hubbard-1 approach, we use this double counting correction V as a parameter in order to fix, or better to constrain, the 4F occupancy on certain rare earth sites. So here in the double counting formula, this NT is the target occupancy of the 4F shell on a specific 4F sites. So essentially, what I do are DFT plus Hubbard-1 supercell computations. And in these supercells, I have many rare earth sites, and I pick one site where I constrain the occupancy to the ground state occupancy, which is 3+ in this case, to the ground state occupancy -1, and then I pick another remote site where I constrain the occupancy to the ground state occupancy +1. Then I run my DFT plus Hubbard-1 computations until they converge. And then I can extract my screened Coulomb interaction essentially from the position, the difference in the position of the 4F levels between the two sites, the two rare earth sites where I constrained my occupancies. So that's essentially what this formula here in red says. So this HKS-FF is the Conchan Hamiltonian projected on the FF. So it's the average position of the 4F level on this rare earth site where I constrained the occupancy to n+1, while the other one is the site where I constrained the occupancy to n-1. And the Hund's coupling J, we did not compute from first principles, so we took it from experiment, which is kind of justified because it's known that it's barely, for the rare earth 4F ion, it's barely dependent on the materials. And in the plot on this slide, in the right bottom corner, you can see our results. So it's the screened Coulomb interaction U for this rare earth mononitride series. You can see that the value of U ranges from 7 eV in praseodymium nitride to around 9 eV in erbium nitride. And the increase of the screened Coulomb interaction simply reflects the increased localization of the 4F shell along this rare earth mononitride series. And then as a comparison, here I also put some values from the literature. These are these green data points. So what they did is Hartree-Fock calculation, and then they simply did a screening which they fitted to experiment for one of the compounds. Yeah, so much for the computational approach. Now I come to the results for the materials. So what I show you first here are electronic spectral functions for neodymium nitride. What you can see in the left panel is the K-integrated spectral function, while on the right, it's the same K-resolved. You have in the left panel, so in blue, you have the nitrogen 2p states, in green, the neodymium 5d states, and in red, the neodymium 4f states. And so you can clearly see that the 4f states, they are now split into a occupied lower Hubbard band at around -4 eV and an unoccupied upper Hubbard band, which shows many additional splittings due to multiplet effects, crystal field, and spin-orbit coupling, which is all included in our approach. And in order to see the optical gap, the band gap in this material, it's better to look at the K-resolved spectral function in the right panel. So there you can see that we have the direct optical gap at X. And if you measure it, it's around 1.26 eV, while in experiment, it's slightly lower. There it's around 1 eV. And the band gap corresponds with the optical gap in this case. Then I also show you results. So we did calculations for a whole series of these rare earth mononitrides. And here I show you results for holmium nitride, which has a more than half-filled 4F shell. So holmium 3+ has 10 electrons in the 4F shell. It's again the K summed and the K resolved spectral functions. And here for this material, we now have experimental data to compare to. In particular, we have XPS results, which are indicated by this black line. And if you now compare the theoretical spectrum with the experimental one, you can see that the peak position matches quite well. So if you take this double peak structure, this we also see in our theoretical spectrum. So what I can compare here is only the peak position, because in my simulations, I don't really simulate a photo emission experiment, so I don't have any photo emission matrix elements in my simulations. Yeah, and I should also point out then we also nicely capture this shoulder here, right? It's seen in experiment, and from our computations, we can say that this shoulder is due to the nitrogen 2p states. And what is also interesting to note, and this you can see from the K-resolved spectrum in the right panel, is that the band gap for this more than half-filled rare earth mononitrides becomes indirect. So now the band gap is between the gamma and the X point, and it's slightly smaller than the optical gap, which is still at X. So the optical gap is around 2 eV, while the indirect band gap between gamma and X is around 2.0 eV smaller. Yeah, and here you have even more spectral functions for more of these mononitrides, like samarium nitride, gadolinium nitride, terbium nitride, and dysprosium nitride. So you can see that the 4F states, they change a lot along the series. Of course, the multiplet splitting changes a lot, and also the average position of the occupied 4F states, they are shifted to lower binding energies. No, they are shifted to lower energies in the plots here due to the increase of the binding energy along the series. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of experimental data available here, only for gadolinium nitride, which has a half-filled 4F shell. So there we have very sharp lower and upper Hubbard bands. And we have, to compare to, we have an XPS spectrum with a not very good energy resolution. So it has this very broad lower Hubbard band peak. But then we can see it agrees nicely. We see this nitrogen 2p states at around -2 eV in our theoretical and in the experimental spectrum. Yeah, and actually that's all I wanted to no, there is still the optical gaps for the mononitrides. So here, what you can see in this plot is the gap size in the series of these rare earth mononitrides. In red, you have the computed optical gap, and in blue, it's the band gap. So as I told you, for the heavy rare earth mononitrides, the band gap becomes indirect. So it's slightly smaller than the optical gap. And most importantly, the red data points, they represent experimental data from previous works. And if we now compare the experimental values to my computed ones, then we can see that the agreement is quite good, I would say. So we nicely capture this increasing trend along the rare earth nitride series. Also this plateau here around gadolinium nitride and dysprosium nitride. But we can also see that in theory, the gaps, there seems to be a systematic overestimation. And since the optical gaps in these materials, they are all PD gaps, this overestimation must be an overestimation coming from this MBJ potential. Yes, and this is now all I wanted to show you for the rare earth mononitrides. And now I still show you some results for these rare earth fluorosulfides. You remember these pigment materials with the nice yellow to red colors. The results here are obtained with exactly the same methodology, which I've presented you before. So this MBJ plus DMFT approach, and also the screened Coulomb interaction computed with this CDFT plus Hubbard-1 approach. Here you can see the spectral functions for praseodymium fluorosulfide, neodymium, samarium, and gadolinium fluorosulfide. You have in here now in blue the fluorine 2p states, which are more ionic than the sulfur 3p states, which are in green. And in orange, you have the rare earth 5d states. And in red, the rare earth 4f states. And for these materials, we have more experimental XPS spectra available to compare to. So we have XPS spectra for praseodymium fluorosulfide, samarium fluorosulfide, and gadolinium fluorosulfide. And I also here, the black lines points is the total broadened spectral function. And that one you can compare to the XPS data. So for example, if you take praseodymium fluorosulfide and you look at this two-peak structure of the sulfur 3p state, so the position is nicely captured in theory. And also the position of this rare earth 4f, the occupied rare earth 4f peak. And also the position of the fluorine 2p states. And you see that it's the same also for samarium fluorosulfide. The peak position between theory and experiment agree pretty well. In gadolinium fluorosulfide, you have that the fluorine 2p peaks, they are, I would say they are absorbed in this very, very broad gadolinium 4f peak. Yeah, and here on this slide, you have now the same, the spectral function, but in this case, K-resolved. From these K-resolved spectral functions, we can easily read off the optical gap. So if you look at praseodymium fluorosulfide, then you have the optical gap at the gamma point. And if you measure it, it's like 2.5 EV. And the optical transitions are between the top of the valence band, which are the sulfur P, which are mainly sulfur P states, to this very dispersive band, which comes down at gamma. And it turns out that this is praseodymium 5D band, which, however, strongly hybridizes with the praseodymium 4F bands, which are these very flat bands in the unoccupied part of the spectrum here mainly. So we have like a PD absorption edge in praseodymium fluorosulfide. The situation is very similar for neodymium fluorosulfide, but then if you go to samarium fluorosulfide, you can see that it's different because there the lowest lying unoccupied 4F states, they are in the PD band gap. So here the optical transitions, they are between the sulfur P states and the samarium 4F states. So in samarium fluorosulfide, we have a PF absorption edge. And then for gadolinium fluorosulfide, as expected, it has a half-filled 4F shell, and the upper Hubbard band is rather far away from the Fermi energy. So there we have a very clear PD absorption edge. And it turns out that this character of the absorption edge, so if it is a PD absorption edge or a PF absorption edge, can also be seen in the optical conductivity. So what I computed here in the second plot here, so in the bottom right corner, you have the computed optical conductivities for praseodymium, neodymium, samarium, and gadolinium fluorosulfide. And it is resolved into contributions. So red is like for linearly polarized light in the 100 crystallographic direction, while in blue it is for the 001 crystallographic direction. And if you now look at, you see already from a first glance, you see that they are quite different, especially if you compare samarium fluorosulfide and gadolinium fluorosulfide. You see that in samarium fluorosulfide, the onset of the optical conductivity is here around 2.5 eV, and it's very similar in 100 and 001 direction. While for gadolinium fluorosulfide, it's very different. So there is mainly only linearly polarized light in 100 direction, which is contributing to the optical conductivity. And if we now go back to our plots above, what I said is that, or what you can clearly see there is that the main difference between samarium fluorosulfide and gadolinium fluorosulfide is that in one case, for samarium fluorosulfide, we have PF optical transitions, while for gadolinium fluorosulfides, it's PD. So apparently, we can see this character of the optical transitions also from the optical conductivity, from the polarization resolved optical conductivity. This applies also for praseodymium fluorosulfide and neodymium fluorosulfide, where it's kind of a mixture of PD and PF, since the unoccupied F bands, they're so close to the bottom of this dispersive D band. Yes, and this is actually all I wanted to tell you. So I have introduced this MBJ at DFT plus DMFT approach, and I've shown you results for the rare earth mononitrides and rare earth fluorosulfides. And actually, we used this approach also for additional materials. So James Booth, a PhD student of Leonid Borovsky, he applied it to the rare earth sesquioxides, where it also worked well. And my master student, Valentin Ransma, used the same approach to investigate a blue transition metal oxide pigment. Yeah, and finally, of course, I want to thank my collaborators, who are Leonid Borovsky, Silke Biermann, and James Booth, all from École Polytechnique in Paris.
Thank you very much, Anna. So the floor is now open for questions. We will start with Antoine. Antoine, you are muted.
Okay, yes, I unmuted. Okay, Anna, very nice talk, also relating to my beloved pigments. I actually have a question. So you found that the nature of the absorption edge really depends on the rare earth. And I don't remember if you mentioned that. Does that imply that for the samarium sulfofluoride, which has an absorption edge controlled by the very undispersive F states, then it would be a better pigment because it would have a sharper absorption edge?
Yeah, I would say so. So as in this very first slide, so the samarium fluorosulfide is taken as an example with this very nice yellow color. So it has a nicer yellow color, for example, than this gadolinium fluorosulfide.
Okay, and the fact that the absorption edge is actually controlled at the for the empty states by the F states is actually supported by XPS, you said, right?
Yes.
Okay, very nice, thank you.
And actually,
Adam?
for this, I would, because there is also this cerium fluorosulfide, right? I did not explicitly investigate it, but if you look at the series, the only thing which really makes sense would be that you have FD transitions there, right? You also have a sharp edge then. But in the bottom, the occupied F states on the top of the valence band, to the DFT.
Because in that case, there is one electron in the F states. That's what you're saying.
Yeah,
It's
and also from the
one.
evolution of the series, how the F states move along the series. But in both cases where you have nice color, it's the F states involved, which have this very sharp energy states, which give a good absorption.
Makes sense.
Adam?
Hi, yes. Thank you so much for the great talk. I was wondering, I know of work from around 10 years ago. I know it's a different DFT pseudopotential, just PBE, but I recall for the rare earth mononitrides, there seemed to be importance given to having a Hubbard U on both, like, you know, of course it's depends on the formalism, but a Hubbard U for both like f orbitals and for d orbitals in the mononitrides. And I was wondering whether you distinguish that if both effects are, you know.
Yeah, I think I know the work that you are talking about. So in our paper, we also have like because there have been quite some previous works, right? We have a literature review. And I recall that in that study where they put a U not only on the Fs, but also on the Ds, it's an ad hoc fix to get the band gap, the semiconducting band gap to the correct value. But actually it's not, I would say, not the right mechanism, right? Because you don't have strong local electronic correlations there, but there it's more non-local exchange and correlations, which give you then the correct band gap.
Of course. My brief follow-up then is, I was just curious about the lanthanum mononitride. You know, does that have occupied F electrons?
No.
You know, what's so you know, what does the DMFT approach really
so actually
change?
there you don't for the lanthanum mononitride you don't need the DMFT for the band structure. You can do pure DFT or DFT with MBJ in order to get the electronic structure for the lanthanum mononitride.
Okay, great. Yeah, because I know at the PBE level you can still get a metal, but the special sauce there, you just need the MBJ, it sounds like.
Yeah, in order to open the band gap, you need a semi-local, you need such a hybrid functional. Right.
Thank you so much.
Or GW to open the gap there.
Yep.
Angui, Chen?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hello, yes.
Oh, hi, Anna. Yeah, very nice talk. Can you go back to page 6?
Okay. This one.
Yes, here. So using this called a constraint DFT to estimate the U values on these rare earth F orbitals. I'm just curious that have you tried the constraint RPA? Usually in literature, people using constraint RPA to estimate U as well.
Yeah,
so
actually, this is what
two methods may give consistent results, or they could be very different.
Yeah, actually, my colleague first tried CRPA for these materials, but it did not really work. So it gave unreasonable values. And I think in these materials, it's really important to get the F states out of the gap so that you don't have like metallic F states at the Fermi level when you do the computation of the screened Coulomb interaction.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, yeah, sorry, please go.
This is what we do differently here, right? So we treat the 4 F states in Hubbard 1 so they don't screen. They are not like
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted. So if I understand correctly, if we're using constraint RPA, the U value depends on the model we pick. So here you're using this constraint DFT. Does the value depends on the model, or this is kind of like the universal values?
I mean, you have basically the same model that you also use in your DFT plus DMFT simulations. Here in the Hamiltonian, you have the Kohn-Sham Hamiltonian projected onto your 4F subspace, right?
Okay, so again, you also need to construct a model first before you calculate, before you can using this constraint DFT method.
Yeah, but it's exactly the same model as the one I use also for my DFT plus DMFT calculations. There I also need to do one-year projection and construct the model, right? Here it's exactly the same model. You always need to construct the models. Yeah.
Okay, great. But then can you comment on why the constraint RPA fails in this particular case? If you don't mind.
I think because in constraint RPA, you have the 4F states, they are metallic states here at the Fermi energy. And I think this can give you like wrong screening effects.
Okay.
So
yeah,
in
thank you very much.
CRPA, they are still here, right? If you do CRPA, while in our approach, they are removed from the Fermi energy.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you very much.
Luca, you have a question?
Yeah. Hi, Anna. Very, very nice. Regarding the need to go beyond the local exchange, I guess, I mean, you did here in order to have correct gaps, but there are also other correlated materials where this is pretty important, like some correlated semi-metals, like the iron-based superconductors, in order to have the correct Fermi surfaces and other situations. So I'd like to understand how general is your choice of using MBJ, and I don't know if you can put it in perspective with the other method that was developed by Silke's group, that was a screened exchange plus DMFT. So do you think your choice of this strategy works in different kind of materials, and what did you choose because it's a faster strategy, and what did you choose because it's a better, I mean, gives better results?
No, I would say it's not that it gives better results. The advantage of this is clearly that it's numerically much cheaper. So here I run only one DFT cycle with this MBJ potential. It basically costs almost nothing, right? Yeah. While the other methods like GW plus DMFT and also the screened exchange is much more expensive as far as I understand.
All right. We should be also the same with hybrid functionals.
And actually, at least for the materials that I have studied, that we have studied here, this MBJ potential gave reasonably good results for the gaps, at least. Yeah.
Okay.
At least much better than LDA, right?
Sure.
So for practical reason, I would say it's a good choice.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, next question from Kanda.
Hi, sorry. So for some reason, my hand raise is not working. So I just wanted to ask a question about the method again. So you have the MBJ potential and you run it through the DMFT cycle only once. Would it matter if you wanted to do it self-consistently and run it through the cycle more than once till you get complete convergence on the densities?
You could do that. But actually, it's worse. I mean, we also tried. It's worse. It gives the gaps are worse that you get when you do it self-consistently. And also often you run into convergence problems. I see. So I'm surprised that it gives worse gaps, because you'd think that the convergence would actually lead to a more, final result, which may be self-consistent. But actually, it's not like LDA, it's not like a functional derived from a total energy function. It's not derived from a total energy functional. So from this perspective, it's also justified to do it also like just as a one-shot correction for the gaps once, and not do a charge self-consistency.
Okay, so it's a matter of it's not a functional. Okay, maybe that
Yeah,
makes
it's
sense.
two methods, two justifications for do this. First, because it's known also in previous works that it gave better gaps when you do it only perturbatively, and also because it's not a functional.
Thank you.